The International Pharma Talks podcast is powered by ELS Solutions Group.
Welcome to today's episode of our podcast. I'm your host, Diogo Sousa-Martins, and today we'll be diving into the expansion of the cannabis market in Europe since its regulation. The European cannabis market encompasses a diverse set of topics and forces us to consider a complex set of interrelated issues. This podcast aims to provide an up to date analysis of the knowledge of the cannabis regulation and expansion of the markets in Europe from each of these divergent perspectives. In most European countries, the cannabis has been the illicit drug most often involved in drug law offenses, and cannabis seizures are both the most numerous and those that result in the largest total amounts of confiscated drugs. Cannabis is the most widely cultivated illicit drug plant worldwide. In addition, it grows wild in many parts of the world. The 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs provides that each country may authorize or prohibit the cultivation of the cannabis plants when it deems it most appropriate measure to protect public health and prevent narcotics from being diverted into illicit traffic. According to the convention, cannabis is defined as the end of the flowering or fruiting branches of the plant, excluding those seeds and leaves which are not accompanied by flowers, the step of which has not been extracted, whatever its application. And the term narcotic drugs refers to the cultivation of the cannabis plant. The convention also defines the term cannabis plant to mean any plant of the genus cannabis and cannabis resin, to mean the separated sap, raw or purified, obtained from the cannabis plant. The convention does not apply to the cultivation of cannabis plant exclusively for industrial purposes, both fibers and seeds, or for horticultural purposes. The Table 1 of this 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs includes cannabis, cannabis resin, cannabis extracts, and tinctures. And at the moment, in many other European Union countries, the regime laid down in the United Nations Convention against illicit trafficking in narcotic drugs and psychotropic substance applies. So all activities involving the cannabis plant, including the possession or use, are prohibited with the exception of those authorized by the authorities for activities related to the cannabis plant in the fields of medicine and scientific research. Exceptions are those activities involving the cannabis plants of the variety known as industrial hemp, in which only the fibers, stems, and seeds can be used, and as the use of flowers and leaves is prohibited. Over the last 20 years, the general trend in national laws in Europe has been to reduce or even remove prison penalties for minor cannabis possession offenses, although in a minority of countries, the penalties for these offenses have been increased. In some countries, there have been experiments with tolerating a restricted supply of cannabis for recreational use by adults, sometimes at city level. In the 1980s, the cannabis cultivation in Europe increased significantly, and the Netherlands became a center for cultivation, production, and export to other countries as well. At the time, there were no legal restrictions on experimentation in developing of new cannabis strains, and the production of cannabis plant seeds was permitted by law, regardless of their possible THC levels. A series of changes to legislation, policy, and relevant case law in the late 1970s through the 1980s essentially decriminalized use and purchase of small amounts of cannabis. These factors established the Netherlands as the center of cannabis production and also know-how in Europe. As cannabis cultivation techniques have advanced and indoor cultivation has spread, the intra-European export market for cannabis has altered. The discussions surrounding this legalization of cannabis for medical use and its impact on the international scene is undoubtedly a complex and nuanced subject, given its constant evolution. In many countries, cannabis on the global scene is being reevaluated for both medicinal and recreational use. And also at a global level, there is a growing phenomenon of accessibility in which the industry of cultivation or importation or manufacturing or even export and dispensation of cannabis based substances and products for medical purposes is evolving rapidly as a result of the regulatory legitimization of an increasing number of governments to officially consider it a key part of preventative or curative therapeutic arsenal for some indications. In Europe, cannabis for medical use is legal in several countries, including Portugal, although legislation varies from country to country. The current key European markets are Germany, Poland, the Czech Republic, and Switzerland. Assessing the extent of cannabis cultivation in Europe is a considerable challenge as the information available in this area is scarce. Reports from a number of countries suggest that it may no longer be viewed as marginal. The legalization of cannabis for recreational use has gained prominence as last April the German government approved a series of measures to legalize the use of cannabis for recreational purposes, alongside Malta and Luxembourg, which have legalized recreational use in 2021 and 2023, respectively. This will lead other countries to do the same. And it is impossible to ignore the fact that we are witnessing a significant change in the way cannabis is viewed and regulated around the world. This transformation has profound implications not only for the pharmaceutical industry, but also for society, as we have seen in Portugal. Germany has emerged as one of the most promising markets for medical cannabis in Europe after approving its use back in 2017. With a population close to 84 million people and a robust health system, it is the current market leader in the European economic area. It is expected to account for more than half of the market, worth more than 840 million euros by 2025. The Polish market growth, these data show that Poland has more than 10,000 patients legally accessing medical cannabis, making it one of the largest populations of medical cannabis in Europe as well. In the Czech Republic, extracts for medical cannabis therapies have been legal since 2022. The medical cannabis flower market is also well established in the Czech Republic, and in the Swiss cannabis market opened up dramatically since August 2022 as well, when a revision of the country's narcotics legislation significantly streamlined access to medical cannabis for patients. So, in a nutshell, the cannabis for medical use is an intriguing and challenging point given the exponential growth it has seen in recent years. We've highlighted in other articles, but I'll summarize it here, some of the main challenge that we encountered by companies where we're contacted to help. First of all, the lack of access to information, because there is some prejudice and misinformation which are still significant obstacles in the medical cannabis market, as a social stigma discourages research and investments in the area. The second one, I would put it as the quality and safety standards, which uh, consistent product quality and safety standards is crucial for legitimacy and consumer confidence, but can be also challenging due to the lack of a global uniform regulation. Also, the need for clinical studies. There is a need, strong need for further studies in the use of cannabis for medical purpose, given the limited knowledge of the safety and efficacy of the products, but there is already a very, I would say, statistically significant cohort of studies that already prove and show some efficacy and respect to different medical pathologies. And the other is internationalization, because laws and regulations vary widely around the world, which can create significant barriers to international trade and market development as well. So this raises the bar for companies which are struggling with the amount of data and regulatory variations, while at the same time striving to meet the demands of better clinical evaluation, requiring companies to invest in new data management systems or seek expert external collaboration for guidance. So, as we have seen, despite some similarities, the international scenario is still not very harmonized. It's a complex process, but with the right strategies, the advice, and resources, companies can successfully navigate the international market landscape. It is extremely important to have a specialized help on the subject to enter these large markets with your expert that knows how to regulate products according to the local regulatory body. And that concludes today's episode. I hope you found this information insightful and that it sparks your curiosity about cannabis market in Europe. Stay tuned for future episodes where we'll continue to explore the latest research, industry trends, and everything you need to know about the international pharma and healthcare business. Thank you for joining us on this episode of International Pharma Talks podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, please direct to iTunes or Spotify.